And we are live. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hack Smarter Twitch channel, or if you're watching this after the fact, welcome back to my YouTube page. I say this every time, but I mean it. It is an honor to have you hanging out with me. And for this episode, interview, I don't know what you guys want to call it, I got a special treat for me, a special treat for you. I am here with the Corey Ball, Chief Hacking Officer at I always want to say API, Appisec University. Corey, man, welcome to the Twitch channel. It is an honor to have you here.
Hey, Tyler, thanks for having me on.
And for those of you on Twitch, I have one eye on the Twitch. For those of you on Twitch, I have no good way to monitor our audio besides the sound check I did right before we started. So if you guys on Twitch, if anything sounds off, looks off, let me know. I will do my best to fix it. I am the interviewer, the technology guy, so we'll see as long as everything doesn't fall apart. Nobody Nate said audio is good to me. All right, perfect. And for those of you in Twitch, I want this to be a conversation with all of us. So if you guys have questions as we run through this, I have a bunch of questions I can run through, but I want to hear from you. So if you guys have questions for Corey, feel free to sound off over in the Twitch chat, and I will keep my eye over on the Twitch. Otherwise, if you're part of the Work Smarter Discord community, there's a live stream chat channel there, and you can ask your questions there if you don't have a Twitch channel, and someone there will pipe your questions over to Twitch. I think that's everything I have by way of introduction. So Corey, the first question I always ask is just the classic elevator question. So if we had never met, I've never read your book, never attended your courses, who are you? Classic elevator speech in a few minutes or less. Who is Corey Ball?
Who am I? It's funny, the technical questions are so much easier. I am a curious entrepreneur that loves to write and hack. And so I have been in computers and selling computers since I was 15. I think, I started to use computers in like elementary school. So it's been around my whole life. And I've done everything from own my own business for 4.5 years, which was Mr. Robot style computer repair store, video game console repair store,
Awesome.
working on everything there. And then getting into the corporate world where I was a IT services manager and information security analyst and everything, and growing out a program at some of the places that I've worked at. And now chief hacking officer and senior manager of penetration testing over at Moss Adams, chief hacking officer over at Appisec University. Outside of that, since we're in the elevator together for a little bit, I'm married to my wife and biggest supporter, Kristen, and we have 3 daughters. They're all in elementary school at this point. And I have a BA in English and philosophy from Sacramento State.
Very cool, man. You have so many things going on. No idea how you balance it all, but we'll talk about that. Before we get to that, I'm just curious about your journey into the world of pen testing, ethical hacking. You mentioned you've been around computers your entire life, but to get in this particular field, are there key people, key resources, just key moments in your own journey?
Definitely some key moments, even early on. So I remember being in middle school, my first security incident that I dealt with was I was playing RuneScape, and
RuneScape,
way back,
man.
yeah,
Yes.
way back in the early days. And someone reached out. I don't know if it was over like MSN Messenger or something like that way back, and they hacked my computer. And so they sent over this remote access Trojan telling me it was something else, classic social engineering. It probably wasn't too difficult either. I clicked on it, nothing happened. Maybe command prompt showed up for a second and disappeared. And they just took full ownership of my computer, started to do things. Error messages were popping up. My CD disk drive was opening and closing. Just, a ghost was inside and wreaking havoc. And so at one point, though, the hacker popped open this window where you could communicate back and forth. And I was just like blown away and so impressed with what they could do that I'm like, please show me your ways. And so really that was my first first step into not ethical hacking yet. That was more unethical hacking at that point. But part of my personality is being a prankster. And so that hacker was gracious enough to give me their software, tell me what they did, and how they got all the information, my IP address and everything else. And showed me their ways. And so
That's
from
crazy.
there,
So they actually interacted with you though. That just blows me away. Like they
yes.
actually were like, yeah, I'll teach you my ways. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know, I don't know if taking that approach during the next ransomware event that happens at your company, just tell them you're really impressed and maybe they'll let you go. But no, they interacted with me. They gave me all the software. They told me what to do, how to use it, so on and so forth. And then of course I used that on all my friends and spread that around. So yeah, that was really my first experience with being able to like take control of another person's computer, gather sensitive information, and all of it doesn't go on a resume. So yeah, those are more of the unethical introduction to hacking. But my ethical hacking career really began in 2015. And so I just got a position as the IT and cybersecurity management for an employee benefit provider. And it all started with, help desk day one, which quickly exploded into all those other things. So I was managing around 120 machines on my own and dealing with all the normal help desk things that you'd come across. And then, of course, one of those things was the CISO there brought these audits from these very large healthcare organizations. And so we had to go through a variety of questionnaires that were anywhere from like 100 questions to 1,500 questions, fill them out, make sure we had the security controls implemented, work with the auditors, and then remediate from there. And so part of that was enterprise vulnerability management. So I started introducing new practices there, including internal penetration testing and vulnerability management. And that led me to want to really dive into it. So of course, first step of a naive person, I got my certified ethical hacker, I got my security plus, and I after getting the certified ethical hacker, I really didn't feel like
do you not feel like a certified ethical hacker at that point?
A very practical hacker. It definitely gave me some like fundamental information, gave me the hacking like methodology, but that just drew me towards the OSCP, which at the time was just so much further up on the practical ladder of hacking. So from there, I really dove into studying the OSCP over a year and a half to 2 years every day. So I was taking tools and techniques, applying them to my organization with permission because I'm an ethical hacker at this point.
Good point.
And
Good
also spending 3 hours a day and several hours over the weekends just in the labs, studying Hack the Box, watching APISec, all the good stuff there, until I finally obtained the OSCP. And then I've been applying those skills and learning more since then.
Very cool. Just very curious about the OSCP. So I just earned that back in December, and I know there's a lot of debate on just the value of the OSCP today, how the value has changed. Would you recommend that as a good point for people to start? Like they want to get into pen testing. Would you still say, hey, try harder, get the OSCP? Is that still a good place for people to hit from your perspective?
I'm not about the try harder philosophy. I think there's a lot of good lessons that get your hands on the keyboard and help you build experience. But yeah, my experience with OSCP was a very like isolating experience where no one was there to help. The people that I was following on LinkedIn or Twitter was like, oh, this test is so easy. Meanwhile, I'm struggling with it. So I'm reaching out to them to be like, why is it so easy for you? And they're like, oh, I've been a pen tester for 10 years. Like, oh, of course it's easy for you.
Just try harder, dude, obviously.
Yeah, just try harder. And so just, I'm more about like mentorship and stuff like that. So getting into maybe a group, like at Moss Adams, we have a group on our team that's studying together for it. And that is a much better experience to learn more of those techniques. So yeah, I think it's a valid path to start out on.
Yeah, and that's key. I'll even just encourage you guys watching on Twitch, if you're not part of the Work Smarter Discord community, how that started was me and my friend Nate, who's on Twitch right now. We both wanted the OSCP, and we started meeting once a week on Mondays just to hold one another accountable, and that turned into like a whole community dedicated to that, and we still have Monday meetings for that purpose. So if you're watching this, you're like, man, I don't have a group at work. I don't have I don't have any friends interested in that, come join our community and you can be part of our sweet online friend group. But Corey, you're involved with a lot of different things. So you mentioned two big titles. The coolest title is the Chief Hacking Officer of Appisec University, and then the other is Senior Manager of Pentesting. I think I got that right, at Moss Adams. Just real briefly, so we have some context, what do those roles look like from day to day? We'll begin with Appisec University. What does it look like to be the Chief Hacking Officer of Appisec University right now?
Yeah, so when I'm not pen testing by day at Moss Adams, I'm working with and at Appisec University. And so there I'm responsible for generating API security content, whether that's of my own courses or helping review other courses or trying to find other teachers and instructors that would want to have a course on our platform. And so it's really working through all of that, encouraging people on social media, spreading the word. And I think most importantly there, which it all comes back to this, is evangelizing API security. So getting the word out that, APIs are so prevalent. They're all over the place. They are the pipeline to the world's most valuable resource. And they're largely insecurities that plague APIs. So just helping close those gaps wherever I can.
That's good. And I'm going to ask you totally a question I did not send you ahead of time. But knowing that, I know there's going to be people watching this either right now live on Twitch or after the fact on YouTube who are maybe security engineers of their organization. And they're trying to speak to the C-suite or those higher up than them, the importance of API security, but they don't know what they mean when we say APIs and what's going on there. How do you explain that to someone who is maybe non-technical in an organization on the C-suite level, the importance of API security from that evangelism perspective? What would you say?
Yeah, so typically when I'm speaking to anyone in that role, my first question as a pen tester is, do you have APIs? And I already know the answer is yes. You already, when a vast majority of the web is API related, your organization has got to be interacting with APIs, whether you're a provider or a consumer of those, which each come with their own risks. And so I typically dive into, if we're talking at a high level, we can talk about a restaurant, for example, and really get the idea of what an API is. And the metaphor there is if you go to a restaurant and you go there to order the food that the chef makes. And so you as a consumer, you don't have to know how to make the dish. All you need to know is how to read the menu. And so very similar to API documentation, you work with a server there that is interacting between the front of house and the back of house. That's the API. It's that thing that bridges the gap between one organization's application and another. And it really enables a lot of the modern day economy to really function. Companies no longer have to specialize in every unique aspect of what it takes to build an application. They can pull those specialties from other organizations and build their own app off of that. And so typically conversation there, this is what an API is, this is what it does. You have them, I'm sure of it. I would put money on it. And either you have them or you don't, which is already getting into that vulnerable realm. Like if you're not managing your assets and infrastructure and you're not aware of it, that's, step one is finding out that you have it so you know what you have so that you can secure it. And two is going into, okay, how are you consuming? How are you providing your APIs? And where are the gaps there? Which top of the line, authorization vulnerabilities plague APIs. So first thing first, can user A access user B's information or interact with their resources? And just going down that route. So the other thing I like to bring to their attention is if they do have APIs, how are they testing those? Because the classic enterprise vulnerability management tools come up with false negatives, and it gives the C-suite this false sense of security that, we scan our APIs and our tools say there's nothing wrong with them. The problem is a lot of those tools don't even have the definitions to find those weaknesses. And so they have to be tested properly in order to find those.
So good, so good. And we're going to spend the bulk of our conversation, I think, talking about that, of course. But also, just for context, you are the senior manager of pen testing at Moss Adams. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? What do you enjoy about that role?
Yeah, so over at Moss Adams, I'm a consultant. So I'm working with a variety of clients and finding new clients to provide them with penetration testing services. So I have the honor of working with an amazing pen test team there and working with an awesome group of clients where we're providing typically 1 to 2 week long pen tests of all varieties. So could be a network pen test, internal, external, wireless, or web app and API pen tests, mobile apps as well. So we're doing the full gambit of testing and working with clients to report on those findings and help provide them with remediation guidance. So there, my day-to-day is working with the clients to make sure that they have their testing scoped out correctly. We have everything that we need for our testers to be successful at it. I'm also going in, I'm getting, as I'm growing up the ladder, I'm getting my hands less and less on the keyboard, but sort of feels like being a doctor, and like the nurse has already come in, she's done several checks, doctor comes in for a smaller amount of time, checks out a few things, and then moves on to the next one. So I still have hands-on with like web app and API testing. We have all sorts of unique findings from week to week, and we'll go in, experiment with those, talk about the risk, what would an adversary really do with this finding and how would they drive it towards compromise. And then of course, with being a senior manager, a new part of that is sales, which when I heard that, it was like something you dread, but really, I guess it's all about your perspective. Like, I'm not knocking on doors, I'm not cold calling or any of that stuff. I'm really helping organizations reduce their risk with a thorough test. So it's really giving the clients this opportunity to close the gaps that they may have in their web apps, APIs, networks, so on and so forth. And that's actually really enjoyable because like one of my goals, whether it's at Appisec as chief hacking officer, senior manager at Moss Adams, is to help reduce API risk like globally. So try and close the gap on this technology that's so important and needed, but really insecure when it's not implemented correctly with the right security controls.
So good. And for those of you on Twitch, I know a few of you have asked questions. I'm not ignoring you, so I assure you I see your questions, and I will come back to them. And I will just say, for those of you on Twitch, if you have questions, keep asking them. I will come back to your questions once we kind of get to more of a technical part to dive into some technical details, which we're almost there. But one question, Corey, I always like to ask people when I interview them is to talk about mental health, because that's a big area that I don't think is talked about much in our field. And for good or for worse, I think our field has that try harder mentality. Some ways that can be good, but in many ways that can lead to burnout, that can lead to depression, that can lead to self-medication with various substances. You have a lot going on. You have really two roles. You have 3 young kids. I have 2 young kids, so I understand how busy just that alone makes you, trying to be a good husband and a good dad while trying to be successful at work. How the heck do you balance all of that? Do you have disciplines in place? How do you prioritize just your own wellness and mental health and all this?
Yeah, and so mental health, it's a very important. Like, you're not going to have a long-term career unless you can really figure that out. You'll, like you said, you're going to get burnt out and so on. And I definitely approached that in the past. Like, I'm doing similar quantities of work that maybe back in my like 2014, 2015 days, that's the closest I've been to burning out. I had all sorts of, I was dealing with panic attacks and anxiety and everything. Funny enough, one of the things that helped me, if you've ever heard of Wim Hof, so like he has breathing techniques and cold exposure. I love that stuff. It really helps with all of that. So there's like, he has a specific like breathing exercise you can do that's very helpful. And then the cold exposure, man, there's nothing that'll clear your mind of work and stress than a physical stressor like the cold. And so that actually helped me on my journey, and a few other things. So one, doing what you really enjoy is very important. And you can spend all sorts of hours when you're in more of a flow state, like doing those things that you're really passionate about and you enjoy. So I think in order to get to that level, you have to weed out the things that you don't enjoy. So there are things that may cause unnecessary stress throughout your day, and figuring those out, whether you're taking notes or so on and so forth, figuring those out and actively working to get those out of your daily activities. I think that's helpful. I'm also, I dread monotony, and so like I hate the same cycle. I always like to mix it up. I always like to get into new things, and I think, part of the whole thing is we're behind computer screens. If we're like going back thousands of years, we're not like hunter and gatherer, and maybe there's something in the bush that's going to get me. So you're behind these screens, you're getting stressed out as a human, and you're like, what is going on? It's very confusing experience that all of a sudden like your heart rate's up and you're breathing and so on and so forth. And so getting out of that cycle by figuring out what's stressing you out, focusing on working towards doing the things that you enjoy doing the most. And I think for me, that dread of monotony, like finding that new interesting thing that you want to research and diving into that. With IT and cybersecurity, there's too much information. It's overwhelming. Being a one-man band here, that's going to stress anyone out. And so really either getting into a team or building out a team, which during 2014, 2015, when it was the worst of it for me, that was huge. So like I said, I was like one person to, at the time, it started out as like 105 employees, then it grew to 150. And that's just getting way beyond what a single person can lift on their shoulders, and making the case to build out a team to help, take on other aspects of the work that you're doing. I think that's important. Getting, joining communities, and for me, one of the things I enjoy is like mentoring. And so that's one of the like passionate side projects you can get into. I was a cyber A mentor for years, and that's just like, you go through maybe some of the stuff that you're not enjoying at work, and you get that time where you can really do something you're passionate about. So mixing in what you're passionate about, what you enjoy doing, weeding out the things that you don't. I think that's helped me.
So much wisdom there. Thank you for sharing that. It helps me. I'm sure it helps other people who are watching this. We'll switch gears again now to talk about some of the technical stuff. I think you really found a niche with both the Hacking APIs book and APISec University. You found a niche field with API Pentesting, and something that was being overlooked in the field at large. When did you come to that realization that API security is something that was being overlooked and was kind of a field that you could have some success in?
Yeah, so I got the first nudge at Moss Adams to start researching APIs in December 2019. And from there, the very first thing I did, I'm big fan of books, especially No Starch Press. So I went on Amazon, I looked up hacking APIs, nothing was out there. So that was my first like moment of my career when I'm like, oh, not everything is already written in a book format and approachable. Of course, from there, I went to all the web app hacking books that I had already, Web Application Hacker's Handbook, and any others that I could find on the topic. And then, go to the index, API, REST, GraphQL, anything like that. At that time, nothing. I think Web Application Hacker's Handbook has like a page, maybe a page and a half, a couple paragraphs that mention APIs. And so you have this, Bible of web application hacking, and it only mentions a couple pages. That's like, okay, I think there's a lot more here than that. And then quickly finding out afterwards, like the Akamai statistic of 83% of all web traffic is API driven. That was in 2019. They've exploded and grown, so that number is probably way under what it is now. But finding that out, finding that APIs are a pipeline to data, and insecure APIs bypass all the other security controls that are typical with an external attack surface. So You don't have to bypass the firewall, gain entrance, land on a machine, pivot around till you get a database, exfiltrate data. You can just use the insecure API to extract the most valued resource that a company often has. And so a lot of that is what drove me to research the topic and then eventually to apply to different publishers with the idea and propose it to them. The final topping on all of that was I'd gone to several conferences right before 2020 hit with with the pandemic, and during those times I already had this as a research topic. I'm looking around for more information. All the top hackers at the conferences I went to, they were giving these elite talks on all sorts of things, advanced exploit development and bypassing multi-factor, all this really good study. So I went to them and I'm like, hey, do you have any experience hacking APIs or testing those? And they either had zero or they had one person on their team that knew enough to test them out. And so
Sure.
That was definitely a practical demonstration that the industry is missing out on a key attack vector and defending it, testing it.
That's so good. And so I'm going to jump to a question from Twitch because it kind of flows into what you're talking about. My friend Amoeba Man said this: the one interesting thing we see, actually, let me back up. He said, what do you think the biggest methodology difference between API pen testing and web application pen testing? Apart from the fact that you don't have the UI for client-side attacks, do you see some other interesting vulnerabilities unique to API pen testing?
Yeah. And so to be clear, good web application penetration testing includes good API penetration testing. And if you're doing a web app, like I said, a majority of the web is API related. So your web app pen test should have a pretty big focus on testing the APIs. And Amoeba Man's correct with, you have the graphical user interface on the web app side. Beyond that, with the API, you can use Postman or Burp Suite to intercept requests and really toggle with those. The big difference there is a lot of classic web app hacking tools are aimed at web applications and completely miss APIs. And so if you're doing a generic scan, the problem is that as soon as that tool hits the authentication page for the API, as soon as it hits that first page for the API and it doesn't have the rest, a lot of the tools stop there. So if the tool makes a request to API v1, gets a 400, maybe the tool, just stops. Whereas if you had a token and you had API documentation, then you can really empower that tool to get the full attack surface. And for API specifically, once you have that authentication token, once you have the token, then you can make authorized requests. And a big problem specific to APIs is that token is often the key to the front door. And then once you have that, a lot of problems could still exist. And so the biggest one that I've touched on is authorization. So once you have that token, you'll see this with APIs where you're now a trusted user. If you make a request to a user's resource without a token, you're going to get blocked. And so back to that web application scanner, it's going to come back with nothing. But if you make a request to your resources with a token, you're going to get those back. The next problem is if you make that same request for another user's resources. So a lot of the API controls in place will make sure you have a token, but maybe they don't have role-based access controls in place to make sure you have, the token that only accesses your information, and you can create, read, update, and delete just your information. They're missing the checks that interact with other users' resources. And so that's a really big, not highly technical, but it's a huge issue. And you can imagine the impact of that could be very severe, whether you're intercepting someone's bank account history, transferring their money, stealing sensitive private healthcare information. All of that can be conducted over an insecure API. In addition to that, I mean, check out the OWASP API security project. There's a whole project dedicated to unique vulnerabilities that are just mainly API focused. And so another one, if you look up improper inventory management or improper assets management, when you're using APIs, you'll notice they use versioning. So you'll see V1, V2, V3, test, UAT, dev, prod, so on and so forth. And so there's a risk that an organization doesn't have a proper handle on their assets that they've exposed. And so maybe V1 is still exposed, or maybe a test or dev environment is exposed to the internet or to users when it shouldn't be. And anytime there's software that's unsupported, then you can find critical vulnerabilities. So maybe like V1 was vulnerable to an injection attack, and V3 they've solved that problem, but V1 is still exposed. And so, yeah, there are findings that are specific for APIs that need the right tools and techniques to test.
Excellent. That's really fascinating stuff. And they mentioned the Twitch chat. Thank you for the answer. So I'll also say thank you for the answer on that. So you wrote, of course, a Hacking APIs book, which has become a bestseller. Every time I turn on my Kindle Paperwhite, even though I have it, it tells me to go buy it again. So that's how popular it is. Like, you are on my Kindle Paperwhite almost every time I turn it on. For me personally, and for those of you watching, if you haven't read the book, I discovered it. I'm a super new pen tester. I haven't been doing it very long, and I do web apps. And I was going to do an API pen test and just didn't know a whole lot about APIs. And that book and Appisec University helped me create internal documentation that now I use on every API pen test I do, and actually find some really cool stuff by using the resources you share in the book as well as Appisec University. But you wrote Hacking APIs, and then from that you created Appisec University. For those who have not been there, share with us real briefly, what is Appisec University and how does it connect back to the book? What do you offer through that?
So Appisec University as a whole is an educational platform for API security related courses. And we've stuck with this philosophy so far, and I plan to stick with it as long as I'm around, which is the information itself should be free. And the course all through and through is completely free. You can I use open source free tools. The content itself is completely free. And then, maybe someday we'll do, well, and we're actually working on a paid certification. So there will be paid certifications if you want to take on a challenge and go through a challenging test to test out an API driven application to see if you can hack into it. And so I do want that side of it. Of course, there's investment involved with like supporting that long term and everything, so that part of it does have a charge. But for me, the information itself, APIs are such a global issue that are a huge driver in the economy, that this is a problem well beyond the scope of what my book can do, well beyond the scope of even what the course can do. And so whatever I can do to get that information out to all the testers so that they can start testing the APIs that they see, because the number of APIs, there's hundreds of millions, I think now, there's just a ton. So there's more than enough to where even if all the testers are going after it, there's probably still going to be vulnerabilities out there. So for me, we got to arm the testers. We got to arm the C-suite with the information. So we're creating courses there with free information to help organizations and people start defending their attack surface.
Dude, that's amazing. For those of you watching, I did share this, and you might be wondering yourself, when do I get a free book? We are giving away 3 copies of Corey's Hacking APIs book, and I'll be sharing a link to how you can get that towards the end of the interview. So you have to hang out with us. So only those of you who hang out with us get rewarded. Those who join and then disconnect, you're not eligible for it. So stay tuned in the Twitch chat. I haven't forgot about that. If you guys are wondering about that, I will be sharing that information towards the end of the interview. But I do have a question on that. So like introductions really try hack me, but into the more formal courses is when I signed up for the OSCP. Now, no offense to offensive security, but I spent $1,500 out of my own pocket. I didn't have an employer who paid for it. I spent $1,500 out of my own pocket to get a PDF and a somewhat buggy lab environment. And then I came across Appisec University as I was working through the Hacking APIs book, and I'm like, how the heck is all of this free? So you have that philosophy, but the question is like, how do you offer all that for free? How are the just the bills paid for what you're doing? Do you take donations? Do you have sponsors? Like, how can people support you money wise to support everything you're doing through APISec University, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so APISec University is supported by APISec AI, which is the leading, from everything I've seen, the leading tool that can help scan APIs for vulnerabilities. So it's a tool and platform that's designed specifically to test for a gambit of vulnerabilities that affect APIs, and it does it really well. So that platform and that business supports APISec University.
Very cool.
Of course, with the courses, they've helped close sales cycles. So, for Appisec University, they used to have to point people to a bunch of different educational sources to help educate and really prove the value of their tool. Now they have their own platform that helps educate people, that brings anyone up to speed pretty quickly on the gambit of vulnerabilities and how they could be exploited in situations. So you can imagine someone that's a decision maker, they go through the course and they realize, oh man, this is one API and we have like 300. So we need something to take on that massive attack surface.
Very cool. Well, once again, thank you on behalf of the whole community that you guys offer that for free. I know I've been helped by it, and I'm sure other people watching have helped by it, and people are just hearing about it for the first time. I'm just seeing in the chat people saying how awesome that is, that all of it's free, that they can sign in and begin learning API pen testing right now. One thing that I think is interesting about you, a lot of things, but one big thing is you're comfortable public speaking. So like, we're live right now. We're doing a live interview. You've spoken at conferences. You do web conferences like this. Public speaking and IT, especially pen testing, aren't usually things that go hand in hand. Usually those who have like the mindset of an engineer, they're not going to get up and talk in front of people, right? It's the stereotypical pen tester, hacker, black hoodie, which I do have my black hoodie on, hood up, right? Anonymous mask, whatever it is. Yeah, you got it too, right? Not wanting to talk to people. How have you developed just public speaking skills, and why are those so important for this field in particular? I think it's something that people often overlook.
Yeah, so I think my first venture into IT and cybersecurity really helped set the course to be comfortable speaking with people. And for example, like my barber, he's like, "You're in cybersecurity, but you can like, you can hold a conversation." How did that happen? And so I think owning my own business early on, I had this brick and mortar store. Like I said, very Mr. Robot like people would walk in with their computers, never met him before, and I offer a service that can help them out. And so I think interacting with them really helped me. And then I just dove into opportunities to speak whenever those were presented. And no matter how nervous I was leading up to it, no matter how crazy I looked on stage, like if you look at my Twitter profile picture, it's Charlie Day when he's, going over his conspiracy theory. I felt like that's how I appeared on stage. I just have like knowledge about a single topic that I wanted to speak about. And I'm just like, frantically meeting the time limits and going through 100 slides in 20 minutes and stuff like that. So just, being brave enough to take that step. Once you get on stage, the rest of it happens and it's over in a flash. And you can work on, especially if you have friends or someone view you that will give you honest feedback, you can work on improving yourself. And so I think a combination of those things really helped. And throughout the rest of my career, if you're in like IT help desk, the better your customer service is, the longer you're going to stick around, the better the experience is going to be all around. So I think when I was managing help desk, that was very important to me, that anyone on the team, no matter how technical and how much of an engineer they were, like, you need to be able to interface with the C-suite. This is a smaller company, so maybe
Sure.
not that opportunity elsewhere, but like, you need to be able to interact with leadership and speak clearly to them. You need to be able to interact with your customers, which are the end users that help support your job essentially. And you need to be able to be friendly and give them the right expectations and communicate clearly. So I think all of that helped. My college degrees, of course, are not technical related. So being a philosophy and English major, there's a lot of communication, presentations, writing, so on and so forth that goes into those I'm sure helped out as well.
And I'm curious on that. Why did you choose those as your majors? It sounds like you've been interested in IT computers for a very long time, but that's what you went to school for. A lot of people would see that and like, how do they connect? Like you've wrote a book, like you've seen how they can connect, but why did you make that decision initially to go to school for English and philosophy out of all things?
Yeah, for me, like growing up with computers, I felt like I knew quite a bit at least. And if not, I could really figure out those things on my own. That and the whole gambit of certifications that are out there. I at the time saw my path as, what do I have those skills. Do I want to go in a formal education program for those things, or do I want to study these other things? And truth be told, my very first college experience was a philosophy class, and I was just like hooked on philosophy. I love like the deep conversations and contemplating the universe and whether or not things exist. That's really captivating for me. And then the English side was, I knew I wanted to write books at some point, and so I thought that would help on that end. So for me, I felt like I had the technical skills and I wanted to specialize in those other things. And sure enough, like it's been so helpful, whether it's being in management and being able to communicate and present, or with the philosophy, like looking through the technical details for very small aspects of a document or policy and procedure writing, anything like that really helped on that end on the technical side.
Yeah, very cool. I'm going to jump to a question on Twitch right now. I'm just going to call him G because G, I have no idea how to say your name, my friend. But he said, hey, Corey, what are some advanced test cases we can perform to check for business logic errors during REST API pentest? And maybe let's pause that question real quick. Do you mind explaining to those who may be uninformed, what does he mean by business logic errors? How would you explain that? And then you can answer the question, how do you test for those?
Sure. Yeah, business logic errors can be challenging to grasp. And so that, for me, I see that as a business feature that can be used maliciously. And in order to test for that, you have to have a pretty good idea of how the application operates. And without that, you're not going to find a tool that's just going to find business logic flaws, because they're literally tied to each individual business. So each one is going to be unique, and it's going to be based on the features that are enabled by that business or some of the backend processes. And so, yeah, you really have to understand how the application works and how you might get beyond a certain control or use a certain feature to attack a business maliciously. And with that, the reason, I don't know, one of the reasons you don't see business logic flaws as a common vulnerability that's out there is that they're so unique, it's hard to pin down like what is it generically. But also a lot of those vulnerabilities can fall into other categories. So a business logic flaw for an API at a car dealership could be, there's an API request that unlocks a car. Okay, should that ever be able to be used to unlock 50 cars at the same time? Probably not. Is that also an authorization vulnerability? Yes. Could a business see that as a feature? Like, hey, I have a car salesperson over here, and they need to clean out the cars beforehand, so we just need one request that unlocks all of them. And sure enough, that may seem like a feature that's built in at one point, but then someone applies a hacker mindset to it, and probably shouldn't be able to unlock 50 cars. And if you ever needed that, it should be very limited for a small amount of time before that's like out there in public. So yeah, it's definitely a challenging topic that's unique to each business. And so understanding the application, how it operates, is your best bet for finding those vulnerabilities.
That's good. That is good. And one thing you just mentioned is the fact that it's hard to find those business logic flaw. Well, honestly, impossible to find it with your stereotypical scanner. I can't talk. Scanner, your stereotypical scanner. One big topic, of course, is ChatGPT AI and how that's going to revolutionize pen testing and maybe API security in general. How do you see that affecting the field as it is, and where it's going to go as we begin implementing AI and API scanners and things like that?
Sure. So somewhere between now and Skynet, it'll be very helpful at assisting security professionals. And so I see it as like, next step in our evolution as security professionals, that is probably similar to like how when Google search came out. And so I don't know if there's quite as much controversy of like, hey, you shouldn't be using Google search, you're a professional, you should already know this stuff, versus now it's like, it's a standard. Like you can search for an attack surface, you can search for answers to a problem, but now that's taken one step further, and so now you can get really educated answers that are eloquent in how they come out. And yeah, I would just say it's great to use as a tool to assist you in your career, but do not take shortcuts. Be aware of what you're doing. Like if you're just copy and pasting stuff out of there, obviously there's scanners that can detect that, and there's going to be a cat and mouse chase between like the newest scanner detecting ChatGPT or whatever it is, and then the next version of the AI that's able to bypass that. So yeah, I would just say like, don't be lazy with it. Be very aware. Like, don't put in sensitive information into this third-party application. Do not put in client information into it. Like, is any client going to be okay with you sharing their data with this third party without authorization? Probably not. Yeah, so don't take those shortcuts, but use it to enhance your testing and your skill set. Great for generating outlines. Like you can put in a prompt for like, what should I study to learn more about this thing? And it's great at putting out some of those details. Also be aware, not something you should just trust as a source of truth. I've had plenty of experiences where I recommend the top 5 books in this area, and one of them, the author is completely fabricated, the book name is completely fabricated. And so the second you start to use something like that as a source of truth, you're just going to get embarrassed pretty quick. And so you need to validate, verify the information that you're getting, do that self-study after you're pointed in the right direction, and yeah, use it as an enhancer.
Sure, that is really helpful. And believe it or not, we're almost towards the end of the interview. And a lot of the questions that have been asked over in Twitch is all about career type stuff. And I think you have a unique vantage point, being a senior manager at Moss Adams, being in this field for a while, running APISec University, or writing the book Hacking APIs. I want you to speak for a moment, and I'll just set up like the profile of someone. And we'll say, let's say they're working in IT support. They have a strong passion, interest in cybersecurity and pen testing in general, but just can't figure out how to connect those dots. Every job either says you need a certain amount of experience in pen testing, that whole thing that they fall into. What is just some career advice you would offer someone right now working in IT support to make that leap to become a pen tester? What would you say to them if we were sitting down with them as a mentor?
Sure. Yeah, and so I do have experience. I was a cyber mentor for a few years, so I got a lot of hands-on with different resumes and practicing interviews and so on and so forth. And then as a manager, I've interviewed my fair share. For me, I am hoping to be a part of the solution that bridges the gap between the entry-level role and penetration testing. I'm completely fine with someone with baseline skills coming out of help desk or otherwise to like get them up to speed on penetration testing. So with that being the case, for me, the number one thing that's so important when I'm looking over a resume is honesty and integrity. So that being said, don't tell me that you're this lead expert hacker unless you can back that up. And so when I look over, the headline will say something similar to lead expert hacker. And then I look down at the technical experience, maybe where you've volunteered and so on and so forth, and I don't see those two things matching up. So the resume itself has to have integrity, but then when you're in the interview, that part has to have integrity too. And so if I'm told, my favorite tool is Burp Suite, I'm a web application hacker, I've been doing this for years, I should be able to ask you what module of Burp Suite you use to compare different requests. The answer being comparer. And so, tripping up on stuff like that is just going to be a big red flag. And I appreciate a candidate that knows where they're at and where they're looking to grow, because that's something you can work with. That coming in day one and saying like, oh, I'm already at this level, even though it's not represented by experience or anything else on the resume, that's a little bit more of a hurdle to get over to start out with. But someone that's new, they have some IT experience or even training. Like one of my favorite hires ever, I brought on a guy that was formerly a sushi chef that had a ton of volunteer experience helping others repair their computers and solve networking issues, so on and so forth. And for me, like I said, back in those IT help desk days, one of the most important things was customer service. He had customer service, he had the knowledge, and he had the will to spend the hours researching to get better. And I think all of that was very important. And one of my favorite parts about the story, within a year of that, he was employee of the year. So he was brought on, he excelled at it. Yeah. And so going from sushi chef to like IT help desk and now being a lead developer. So, I can work with missing professional experience and the will to be a lifelong learner and really dive into the topic and study.
That is excellent advice, and just reflects. I mean, I'll just second that. I just got my first pen testing job, but I said I don't know how many times, right, in the interview, and was actually told no initially. I actually made a video about this. Rhino, where I work now, said you're not at the point we want you to be at, but let's meet in 10 days and see where you're at in 10 days. And they offered like Portswigger Academy, and in that 10 days, I went through I think 50 labs on there, made like a mock pen test from Juice Shop. But web apps just were new to me even then, because I was so used to the try hack me hack the box, where a web app was just like popping a Python shell or some type of shell to get on the system, and then very CTF like. But they gave me that opportunity. Like, you're not where we want you to be, but let's meet in 10 days, see where you're at. And I'm still learning, still totally noob to this. But that's one of the things they said is like, just being honest about that. I don't know. And maybe not putting, like you said, integrity. So maybe don't put on your resume like elite RuneScape hacker. You got people's CDs to pop open and you stole their creds. I gave a talk at a college, and that was my story as well in RuneScape. Me and a friend would say, hey, they implemented this new feature that if you type in your password, it shows up as asterisk, right? And my friend would type in asterisk.
Yeah.
People type in their password, you sign in, drop their stuff, sign back in, take their stuff. So I got my introduction to hacking as well. So RuneScape was a bad teacher, teaching people how to hack stuff.
Creating hackers for years, decades.
That is amazing. Well, hey, Corey, we are at the end. So one final question for you. Do you have any just closing words of wisdom? You can break into that philosophy, any encouragement that you can share with us as we sign off. And then I'll do the book giveaway for those of you on Twitch. I haven't forgot about that either.
Sure. Yeah. I think, one of the lessons that I've learned, especially with writing a book, is I went into IT and cybersecurity with the assumption that, there's already a strong base of knowledge. Most things have already been uncovered, and we're just reviewing, the documentation that's already there. It's not true. There are so many books and topics. There's a huge space for you to create your own area of specialty and study in any topic that you can come up with. You can dive deeper into that and bring your own special perspective to it. So if you have the desire to write a book or a blog post or anything like that, there's so much space to spread the knowledge, and the industry needs it. So like, take that first effort. It's great to build out your career, your resume, or, help you establish yourself and who you are in the industry. So yeah, go for that. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Once you've done the research and the legwork, like, don't be afraid to talk about it in front of a group, whether it's small or large, and, just take that next step.
So good. Corey, thank you again for hanging out, for sharing. For those of you on Twitch, I just dropped the link. It's just a Google form. Just ask you your email and then ask you to share like your LinkedIn, Discord, or Twitch name, only so I can make sure it's not the same person abusing my business logic flaw and giving me like 6 emails and 1 application to win the book. I guess if you really need the book that badly, do whatever you want. I have no way to monitor that. But I did just drop the link over in the Twitch chat. I'm only going to leave that open, guys, for like 10 minutes. So fill that out. And I will say, your email, your name, it's not being used for any marketing purposes. The only emails I'm going to send Corey are the 3 winners. So once I have all those, I'm going to randomly select 3 people. I'll let you know that you won. I'll pass your information to Corey, and he'll send you some information how you can get a book, and also his org will cover the shipping costs as well for that book and for the shipping. So I'm going to drop it one more time since you guys said it's closed. I dropped the link again, so hopefully y'all saw it. If you did not see it, I'm going to drop it one more time. Open your chat, look at the link, fill out that Google form, and I will get back to you ASAP on those top 3 winners. So fill it out. Would appreciate it. And Corey, thank you again, man. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for your time. And for the rest of you on Twitch, thank you for being here as well, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.